So first of all, what an incredible crowd. This is my first in-person event since 2000 whatever, and Dr. Berg said this is like her second or third. Second. So it feels a little different, but we're super excited to be here to share this information with you. As Susan mentioned, I am the Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program Coordinator at A.T. Still University. So we are a program office for the Area Health Education Centers program, and Mid-Mo is a regional center. So we have this whole tier of very complicated conversations through the AHEC. And so we're here to have Dr. Bergweger talk about caregiver well-being and the screening initiative that we started 2 years ago using WEP dollars. So I just kind of want to share a little bit about the Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program and what it is about and how the GWEP actually brought us to Mid-Mo. So the GWEP, there are 46, is that right? 48 in the US, and so St. Louis University is our funder, so the funding comes from HRSA, goes to St. Louis University, then it comes to A.T. Still University, and then we have the 7 regional centers throughout the state of Missouri to be able to work with. Mid-Mo, we approached Sarah 2 years ago, and she was very excited, and she and her team have done an incredible job, and so I'm super excited for you to see what they've put together over the past 2 years, and that will be later today when they unveil the new caregiver wellbeing webpage. So the GWEP, so we have several initiatives through the GWEP through St. Louis University and working at ATSU. So the goal is to improve the overall health of older adults, and how we do that is we have the rapid geriatric assessment. So it's an assessment tool. It's very brief. It's 4 separate validated tools that looks for frailty, muscle loss, muscle mass, that sarcopenia, older adult aging, that anorexia for older adults, and then cognitive impairment. And then there is a prompt for the advanced directive. And it's a very good tool to use for the Medicare annual wellness visit. So it's just one of the many tools that we have at SLU and ATSU. And then we have cognitive stimulation therapy. So we're screening for cognitive impairment. We have this incredible evidence-based program for people with mild to moderate dementia. And then there's the social isolation and loneliness that Dr. Bergweger works with, and then Circle of Friends. So the GWEP is also about maximizing the patient and family engagement. And so caregiving is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And so I sort of just took this one item on our scope of work, and really that's something that I've really tried to focus with our grant dollars that we have to give to the regional centers. And then integrating into geriatrics and primary care. So providing these resources and education to primary care providers. We know that our number of geriatricians is declining in the state of Missouri and nationally. And so being able to provide those resources and education to primary care clinicians is really important. And then working together on interprofessional teams. And then lastly, the RAISE, it's the Caregiver Family Act that was enacted in November of 2018. So it stands for Recognize, Assist, Include, Support, and Engage. And they have 5 different items that they're working on, some goals. So they want to increase awareness of family caregiving. They want to integrate family caregiving into the healthcare systems and processes. So not just for the patient, the care recipient, but also for their caregivers. Increasing access to resources and services, and increasing financial assistance and workplace assistance and protection. And then a better and more consistent research and data collection for caregiving. And so I think the program that they're doing here at Mid-Mo just really checks the box for each one of these and puts Phelps Health way further advanced in the caregiver realm than so many other healthcare systems in the state, not just the state of Missouri, but nationally. So I am thrilled to be able to introduce Dr. Marla Berg-Weger. She is a friend and colleague. She is the executive director at St. Louis University's Geriatric Education Center. She is a professor in the School of Social Work at St. Louis University. She is an expert in social isolation and loneliness, cognitive stimulation therapy, caregiving, and she is just a wealth of knowledge, and you will thoroughly enjoy her presentation. So Dr. Marla Berg, I did, there are some demographic forms. These are required forms because our funding comes from HRSA. So if you could fill those out, you can just leave them on the table or on the back table when you get finished, but they are really important to the work that we do.
They are. Thank you. Well, thank you, Debbie. I just want to say Debbie has been just incredible to work with, and she has really expanded the presence that we've been able to have through our grant across the state through all the AHEC. So we really appreciate that. Thank you all for the invitation to come in and talk today. I was saying it feels a little strange to be in person and not looking at everybody in little boxes, but it's a good strange experience. So caregiving is near and dear to my heart as well. I've been studying and working with caregivers for longer than a number of you have been alive, actually. But what we've decided to focus on today, given what we've all just spent the last 2 years experiencing, is really looking at issues of the formal caregivers. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. That said, I don't think there's probably anything that I'm going to say that doesn't apply to the category of people we refer to as informal caregivers, those who are caring and not being paid to do that job, and caring usually for loved ones, but not always. We have to do disclosures. You've already heard about our HRSA funding, and we are just getting ready to enter year 4 of our current 5 years of funding. So just want to kind of set the stage by talking a little bit about what is caregiver fatigue or compassion fatigue. And I suspect most of you probably could write the definition and give me some more specifics than what you're going to get from me. But we'll kind of at least have a common understanding of how the research looks at that. And then kind of how do we get ourselves from being compassionately fatigued to experiencing compassion satisfaction, particularly in the workplace. I just love this quote: "The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet." And again, I just, for those of you that have been doing this, particularly in a healthcare setting for these last 2 years, we need to have you do the presentations, because I think you've probably learned how to do this. If not, hopefully I can offer a couple of thoughts. So what is compassion fatigue? It is just what you would expect it to be. There's no mystery about what it is. It's just this accumulation of stress, whether it's physical, emotional, usually it's both. But that happens over a period of time. So it's one of those that kind of sneaks up on people and they don't even realize, particularly if you're in the midst of a pandemic, it sneaks up on you and you just don't even realize until you maybe have a break from it, or somebody mentions to you. My friend that I saw on Saturday, she said, one of her coworkers said, "You look really tired." And that was sort of this aha moment. She didn't realize how tired she actually looked. And then when she thought about what's happened in her life in the last few months, made sense that she probably was fatigued. So I think the other thing about compassion fatigue is that it really does create this sense of tension between what you want to do, what you need to do, and what your emotion and physical health are trying to get you to pay attention to. And it can certainly be very progressive, and as the slide in a few minutes will show, it can really take a toll, again, which I suspect most of you know. So all these terms that get thrown around, burnout, stress, compassion fatigue obviously being one of them, the terms get used interchangeably, and essentially they are the same thing in many ways. I think that the whole concept of compassion fatigue came about because the people that this is most relevant for are those that are doing what they do because you're passionate about it. You have compassion for others. And as you can see here from this slide, I thought this was a good one just to sort of ground us in, are there differences? Compassion fatigue really tends to be much more of a personal kind of experience because you feel so compassionate. One of the first caregiver study I did, I interviewed adult daughters of who took care of their parents. And one of the questions I asked was, how did you get in this role? And it's a long about story, but because I asked it as open-ended questions and I got long about stories. But essentially what it came down to is either somebody asked them to do it, like a deathbed wish request, or they just did it because that's who they are. And so that's when I really started to understand that people do caregiving out of passion, whether it's formal or informal. And burnouts often is a structural organizational kind of issue. So I think that if you want to think about those as different, they are in many ways, but again, the terms get used interchangeably. So kind of to continue on with that theme a little bit, other terms that you'll see, particularly in the popular literature, a lot of this particularly prompted by the last 2 years of what we've lived through, there's been a lot more focus on these issues, which glad to see that. You know, I wish there'd have been that much attention on things previously, and we might have all been better positioned, I think, had organizations been able to recognize that having workers have better well-being is better for everyone. But vicarious traumatization, secondary trauma, secondary stress, again, these are all similar concepts. And if you're experiencing any of them, call it what you would like. So regardless of what it's labeled, what it's, you know, the researchers or the healthcare industries call it, it's not a good thing for any of us to experience. And it certainly has the ability, as does any kind of caregiving, when you're putting your all into something and maybe not always getting the equal amount of gratification back from that, because caregiving is stressful. It really does negatively impact. And particularly in the case of formal caregivers, again, I don't need to keep harping on this point, but, you know, high volume of workload, kind of living in a constant state of crisis, those are issues that they take a toll, no matter how proactive and how preventive you can be. If you're not engaging in self-care, which is what the majority of my time is going to be talking about, you know, it's going to take a toll. So how do you ensure that you become compassionately fatigued? If you work too many hours, if you are in a career that maybe isn't the one you envision for yourself, or you don't see opportunities for advancement, too much paperwork, that probably doesn't resonate with anyone, I'm guessing, or maybe doing a job you weren't trained for. We know most caregivers, in fact, are doing jobs. Informal and formal caregivers are doing jobs that they don't necessarily always have the training for. That's probably more relevant for informal or family caregivers, because the expectations for family caregivers is just increasing. Every time the Alzheimer's Association annual report comes out, there's something new about the level of care that caregivers are providing for their family members with dementia. If you're feeling under or unappreciated by those around you, whether it's personal or professional, if you're underpaid, those are all things. If you feel like you don't have a voice at your workplace in particular, that can lead to the sense of not feeling valued, not feeling as if you have any power within that system. And the list sort of goes on, you can read. And I think the important piece about that is if it's not balancing, if work leads over into your personal life and vice versa. So I think it's compartmentalization does have its benefits. So here I talked some about the impact. I will just give you all a minute to sort of soak this in, because time doesn't permit us to talk about all of these issues. But just see if you see yourself anywhere in any of these. Don't have to hold your hand up if you do. Or if not you, do you know someone that you think might fit into one or more of these categories? Okay, so taking that in. Now, let's look at what this accumulation of working too hard, maybe not feeling as valued, not feeling as productive, being asked to do things not prepared or trained to do. This is the breakdown of what it does to various aspects of your body and your functioning. First time I ran across this, I went, oh, yeah, that one sort of makes some sense to me. Well, more than one of those for myself, because I'm one of those that I tend to work and social life kind of all run together sometimes. So again, we won't go over all of these, and I'm happy to, Susan has a copy of the slides, and I'm happy to share those. This is not my original work. I'm obviously just passing it on from others, but happy to share it nonetheless. So again, I just think we don't, especially in the moment when we're feeling particularly stressed and just trying to kind of survive and get from one thing to the next, we don't stop and think about, that headache or that nausea I'm feeling or the stomach ache, you don't necessarily connect those. Hopefully in healthcare, this is an audience that maybe is more likely to make those connections, but might not be able necessarily to act on those. So I should just sort of take that in. So when an organization has a healthy environment, hopefully and the research bears this out over and over again, that healthy organizations have healthy people who work there. But in the event that it doesn't even mean that the organization is not healthy, but there is a cost when even an individual employee gets to the point where they could be sort of labeled as compassionately fatigued. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's a high turnover rate because people don't always know why they're leaving jobs, but they are. And we obviously know from these last 2 years, the great resignation, as it's called, has happened very much in the healthcare world over the last couple of years, particularly for direct care staff. We do work in skilled care facilities, and we've seen just incredible turnover. And with the organizations doing everything they possibly can to support the workers, it's still been very challenging. And I'm sure you've experienced that or heard that as well. So it costs an organization money when there is a high turnover. Even when one person leaves, it still costs. Patient safety certainly can be compromised if people are feeling fatigued, burned out, stressed. Continuity of care can be compromised. The work environment is not as supportive and helpful as it could be, and productivity goes down. So it makes organizations, and I think there's a much greater awareness about this than at any point that I've ever seen in my career, that organizations want people to be healthy. And that's why we're here today talking about this very issue, because this organization has invested in wanting to make sure that people are feeling well supported. Okay, so how do we know if we're experiencing this or our coworkers are experiencing it? I think when you hear people say and think some of these things, then I think those should be the kind of red flags if you are yourself experiencing those. So what are the risk factors? In addition to all those things that I talked about in terms of the job, but you can kind of just scroll down this list and look. So people who are worried about money, and most of us are worried about money most most of the time, honestly, but not necessarily feeling completely gratified and fulfilled with your work. And I guess the point that I really want to make is we're talking a quarter of the 1,012 people that were surveyed to in this particular study said that these things were part of their daily lives. So I think that in and of itself warrants us paying more attention to, okay, what is my coworker is, you know, I'm wondering about them. And we don't have to, you know, get overly nosy, but I think it's, you know, if you start to see a picture coming together of people struggling, maybe, you know, maybe this is the kind of support that they could use to address some of these things so they could feel much better. And the list, you know, most of these, quite honestly, are things that we all experience, you know, at different points in life, but it's that accumulation. So that's the key to all of this that we've been talking about, is it's when it's just reaching that point of feeling overwhelming. And if you Google self-care, you will, hours later, you will come up out of the rabbit hole that it's very, very easy to get into. And as I was thinking about talking with you all today, I was like, oh, how much do I want to share about this? Because I think, you know, these are all people that work in healthcare or certainly are well connected to the healthcare system. You probably don't, you know, need a self-care wheel, for instance, to be able to know that. But I think, you know, these tools that are out there, and many that are out there are, you know, are just reminders of what we already know. I mean, we all know we need to take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. We know that. It's just a matter of being able to carve out time to do it, quite honestly. And there is no magic answer. And I obviously don't need to tell this group that. There is no prescription. There is no magic pill. There's nothing that I could say to all of you that, yes, this is what you need to be doing. Because self-care is probably one of the most individualized things. What works for me, or what I try to make work for me, you know, it isn't probably going to work for others. So that's the whole piece about this. It really, to be able to kind of figure out where the balance is so you can get to compassion and satisfaction, is to figure out what's the magic formula for you. And usually it's not anything that's terribly big surprise. So if kind of having a visual depiction like the self-care wheel would be helpful for you, by all means. And I've included just a few here. And again, these are, I just want to get the whole piece on here so you can't really see these all that well. This one actually, quite honestly, in full disclosure, if I had to fill this out, that would be stressful. That's too many questions and too many things to think about. But if you like filling out surveys and it's helpful for you, by all means, please do. That's why I included it. And I think that, again, you know, a lot of what these things can do for us is they're just reminders. So, you know, at the end of the day, I can leave pressures of work behind. Well, if you had to say never on that, oh, there's a red flag. Let me put that one over on the maybe I need to do something different column, and others. So I think the other thing that happens when you do these sorts of self-assessments is many times people will figure out they're actually doing a pretty good job, that they are doing. I mean, they are exercising, because that's what we all keep hearing. We need to exercise, eat well, get plenty of sleep. And, you know, these can be kind of affirming in the sense that they'll be good reminders that you're doing a good job as well. So the caregiver well-being scale. I had a hand in developing this, so I'm a big fan, but I mostly like it because it's so short. And my colleague, Susan Tebb, developed this many, many years ago. The original one, Debbie is very familiar with this, and some of you will be as well, was 48 items long. is it 48? We've not used it in so long, I've actually forgotten. And, it was a great research tool because statistically it helped let you do all kinds of things. Clinically, no. I mean, who's got time to administer a 48 item scale? And my colleague, Sue, is a social worker, and she actually was working at a VA in Kansas when she realized that caregivers were really a stressed group of people. And this was long enough ago that we didn't know much about caregiver stress. There really wasn't a lot of research out there. So she wanted some way to be able to conversationally and clinically be able to have a tool that, it didn't matter what the score was. It didn't matter statistically, are you stressed? Are you maybe kind of stressed? Are you pre-stressed? That was not her goal. Her goal with this was to be able to have a tool that she could sit with caregivers and talk about it. And that hopefully it would then be the conversation and not a score that led to the plan for trying to address those things. And so over the years, we both ended up at St. Louis University. And over the years, we went from that long one to, I think the second version was 16 items. And now we're down to 6. And it is a valid scale, by the way, for those that want to make sure you're using evidence-based. It is a valid scale. All versions of it are valid. And the idea that she had in her mind when she created that original one was, some of you probably remember from some class, I think it was Psych, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you can't ever get to self-actualization, which is the pinnacle that we all aspire to in life, if your basic needs aren't being met. And so if you're worried about shelter and money and health, safety, all of those things, that's where your energy goes. So that's why she wanted to create a conversational tool. And if you see here, we've got this divided into activities and then meeting basic needs. So just going through and scales are helpful, which is why we've retained the scale part of this, because like the one I just had up on the screen, being able to kind of rank yourself can trigger, in a positive way, your awareness about, oh, I didn't realize that I was, had not been to see a doctor in 3 years. I just have been so busy, I just had slipped my mind. So again, we all know kind of what the signs are. It's sometimes not having the time, the resources to be able to address them or do something about it. My favorite story that Sue tells, she was sitting with a woman who cared for her husband who had dementia, and I don't remember which one of these items it was. Oh, taking time to have fun with family and friends. And the woman shared with my colleague that she had dropped out of her bridge club because she just couldn't leave him home alone. And so that, ended up with them talking about, well, what options would there be? What would you need to have happen in order to rejoin your bridge club? And she said, well, somebody that I could trust to come to the house. And one thing led to the other, and come to find out, there's a teenage boy who lives across the street that they knew, they trusted, they'd known him all his life. And so they worked out an arrangement where the woman paid him to come. He sat with the husband, and she got to go back to bridge club. So it doesn't have to be life-altering. Well, sometimes they end up being life-altering, but it doesn't have to be major life changes. But it's just those things what brings us joy? What brings us calm? What brings us satisfaction? So this one, I'll go back just for a second. This was actually developed with family caregivers in mind, but we've really seen that it has some We never validated it on professional caregivers, but just our clinical intuition sort of tells us that these are things that oftentimes professional caregivers are not attending to. Assessing your own sense of fatigue, where you are on a scale, if that is a helpful measure for you. There's not the perfect one by any means. And it's always important, if you're going to look at how to assess this in yourself or your coworkers, family members, you know, what is it you're looking for? And anytime you want to measure anything, you need a tool that's going to measure it. And sometimes it's an open-ended question. Debbie mentioned that I do a lot of work in addressing loneliness and social isolation. And there's all kinds of scales. We have a scale to measure loneliness that's validated that we created during the pandemic, actually. And but the research shows that one of the best questions that you can ask, particularly women, interestingly more so than men, is, are you lonely? That's the most valuable, because women, I see some heads nodding there. Women will tell you, men like scales, apparently. They actually did a research project on that. So, but I think, you know, figure out which one to measure and what's the easiest way to get the information. Sometimes just asking the question is really the way to do that. And then figure out, you know, are you looking at a short term? We all thought the pandemic was very short term when it started. It's ended up being long term. And so I think that's one of the reasons that there's a lot more attention being given to professionals' well-being than there probably was before. And just know that there's you know, no measure that's going to definitively diagnose anything. They're usually just screens. All right, so getting to the compassion satisfaction part, which we should all be aspiring to. And compassion satisfaction is that sense of being able to fulfill that passion that we have. And it comes from helping others. And I would assume everybody in this room is doing what they're doing and are here today to hear and think about these issues because you help others. And I think we're all probably we're different disciplines, different professions, but the one thing that does bond us all together is we got into these jobs because we wanted to help people. So how do we get there? So we know that burnout and stress and being overworked will get you to fatigue. So what can we put in there to derail the inevitable outcome if no action is taken? And I think that's where this compassion satisfaction comes in. So I could probably just stop here because here is the answer that I have for this. This is the takeaway, if you will, self-care. And most of us are not good at that. We're not really sure what it is. And I teach social work students, and we have them develop a self-care plan. And it's almost like there is an expected right answer. They all come back with, I need to get more exercise and I need to eat better. Well, that may or may not be the answer for anyone else. And I'm not always sure it is the answer for them either. But there are 139 different definitions. I did not count that, I read that, for self-care that are in the literature. And, you know, disciplines look at them very differently. You know, not surprisingly, my discipline of social work, we've been talking about this for decades, whereas it's more of a newer concept, I think, for some disciplines. But I bet, you know, I've not looked at all the 139 of them on, we'll have to confess, but I think that there's, you know, you can probably see the disciplinary perspective coming through in the definition. But generally, it's a professional activity that makes you feel present and empathetic, to be able to feel an enhanced sense of your capacity. So that's what we all want to get to. And that's probably what most of us envisioned when we chose the professions that we're in. The classic in social work, and I don't know how this applies to other helping disciplines, but the classic response of why do you want to be a social worker is I want to help people. That's great. What do you want to do? Well, I just want to help people. And so that's why we have social work degree programs. We help them figure out how do you want to help people. So I've been around helping professions long enough to know that that is sort of the thing that brings everybody to the profession, but then you have to figure out, and sometimes painful as it is, sometimes people figure out they're never going to get to compassion and satisfaction because they're not in the right discipline or the right profession or the right job. So I think that we can kind of aspire to that, but know that everybody has a different path to get there. Sometimes it does take big life changes. But really, if in aspiring to being able to feel like you can say, and in all honesty, yes, I feel very satisfied with my job. That's great. Tell us your secret would be my response, because not everyone is. And even under the best of circumstances, where the person is very committed to self-care, they can't get there. They just can't get there. So what is it not? So self-care should not be a reactive thing. You shouldn't be thinking about doing self-care, whatever that's going to look like for you, after you're already so burned out that to add one more thing is more stressful. It needs to be something that you just start doing at a non-stressful time of your life, early on, which is why we ask social work students to develop a self-care plan, because if you can start doing it early and it just becomes part of your life, that then when you do face those periods of adversity and challenge and stress, you've got the routine there, and to develop a self-care plan doesn't become a burden because it's already part of who you are and what you do. It's not a luxury. It's not selfish. Although I do see, and I have felt this at different points in life, having an investment and a commitment to your own well-being can make you feel very guilty. I've got kids that need to get to soccer games, and I've got groceries to buy, and I've got, school projects, and I've got work, and as many women are also caring for older relatives. Where would I even fit in a self-care plan? So I think you have to sort of gauge where you are in life, and do what you can do. But the key is that it should not be some sort of superficial thing that you're not passionate about. One of the things, my dentist actually asked me, probably a year ago, he said, have you done anything during COVID that you didn't think you would do, or that you didn't do before? And I said, yes. I hadn't thought about this in that way. I was so interesting that Dennis asked me that. And I said, yes, a friend and I started hiking. I've always been a big walker, but I hadn't necessarily been a hiker. We hike every Sunday morning, and we have now done over, last count, I need to update the list. We're probably at about 115, 120 different separate trails. And that has been, I didn't know how much I like that. And I find in the weeks that we can't do it for weather or other reasons that I miss it. I miss it tremendously. And I've come to realize it's a self-care thing. And it's actually one that works. So I'm kind of sorry I didn't figure it out years ago. So think about what are those things that make you feel good about what you're doing. And I've certainly made this point before. It is not one size fits all. And there's lots of programs out there, and they're great. And some people do need structured programs, and people kind of give them guidance, but not everyone does. And what works for you isn't going to necessarily work for you. So I think, and sometimes you have to experiment. So I hope as we're as we're here today, you're thinking about, okay, what do I really do for myself, just for me, at work and outside of work. So is it, I mean, typical kind of things, massages and having pets, and pets really do bring us, into a better place usually. But again, that's not for everyone. And what are the kind of things that you can do with the resources you have, and time being one of those resources, that makes kind of you feel like your shoulders go down, you feel like you just have a sense of calm. One of the things my friend and I read about after we started this hiking was forest bathing. Has anyone heard of forest bathing? Yes, I see one head. It's where you just sort of go out and not literally bathe, but you just take in, you just immerse yourselves. And I think in a very weird sort of way, I think that's a little bit of what she and I have experienced, because we've trunked all over, the eastern part of the state and into Illinois a few times. And it's been challenging at times, but I think we've just kind of let go of the things that are out there. All right, so I really kind of tried to drive home this point about being more proactive with it. And I'm not sure, quite honestly, after these last couple of years, I'm not sure that some of this really is applicable, because we've all been stressed for the last 2 years. So think about, what has to come together for you to have a self-care plan. You're the expert on your lives. You are the expert on your life. So not that it's not okay to listen to other people's suggestions, but ultimately the decision lies with you about what you think. Look at how you respond to stressful things in your life. Do you withdraw? Do you get angry? Do you get depressed? What has kind of been your MO in times of adversity? And then figure out, has there ever been anything that I've done in those times of crisis that's worked? Probably there is, because you're still here. And so build on those, because those are your strengths. And you'll be the one that's going to come up with the best plan for you. And sometimes it really comes down to what are those things that I value most? What are my priorities in life? And where do those priorities fit in terms of my being able to get to this place where I feel satisfied with my work and with my life? Because yes, we can set boundaries and we can compartmentalize, but who you are out here is what you bring to the workplace, and vice versa. Who you are at the workplace is who you are outside, and they do impact one another very, very much. Do your own self-assessment, as I've said, however, whatever works for you on that, but just know, what are your strengths, what are your resources, what do you want to do? Is there that hobby that you've always thought you would like? Apparently mine was hiking and I didn't know it, but I do now. So that has been just great fun. So understand shared power. And this really is mostly relevant to the workplace, but it can also kind of bleed over into your personal social life as well. So shared power is very self-explanatory. It's where you don't have to be all to everybody all the time. And you don't have to always know the right thing to do. You don't have to know all the answers to every question that you're asked. Helping professionals, that may be one of our biggest occupational hazards, is that we think we've got to know everything all the time for everybody, every situation. That's overwhelming if you think about it. Now, if nothing else is going to make you feel stressed and fatigued, that will be. It's okay to say, I don't know. I'll see what I can do to find out the answer. And you don't have to make every decision. interestingly, because one of the things, if you recall, I said a few minutes ago was that people get stressed and fatigued in the workplace because they don't feel like they have a voice. And so I think, you know, I'm a little bit contradicting myself here in a sense, but I think within the scope of whatever our jobs are, I think that, you know, we don't always have to have the right answer. As somebody who stands up in front of students and teaches and does trainings and talks like this, you know, I used to think I had to be able to answer every question. I've gotten more comfortable with that, and it's okay. The key is for your own well-being, go find the answer, because otherwise it will sort of be left hanging out there. And you can't, the other piece about shared powers, you can't take responsibility for others much as you want to, maybe much as you feel like you're supposed to. That is really not yours to take. Okay, set practical goals. You know, don't say, I am going to, you know, in 3 months run a marathon if you don't run it all now. That's not a realistic goal. You're setting yourself up for lack of success on that one. And so that's the one piece I want to make sure that I convey. But then also prioritize self-care so much so that it's a regular part of your schedule. I know every Sunday morning, my friend and I are going to pick her up and we are going somewhere. We've kind of worked that out in the days before that. And it's just there. I know that's what we're going to do on Sunday mornings. So I think that's an important piece, because then it does become part of your lifestyle. Be open to change, because it's going to happen, and being able to accept that, you know, I have to take care of myself in order to be helpful to others. That's a change, and sometimes we're not terribly open to that. Figure out who your support systems are. You probably know that already. Sometimes the people who you think are part of your support system, and they are, maybe aren't always the most encouraging of you. So maybe kind of take a look at that, both inside and outside the workplace. You know, do they support your efforts to, you know, if you said, I'm going to do this at this time every week, so I'm not available to do this other thing, are they going to be supportive of you? Or are they going to really question, maybe be critical about that? Hopefully not, but it's important. And, you know, we talk about the biopsychosocial perspective and that we need to attend to all of those aspects of our lives. But I think in recent years, we've also come to realize that the spiritual aspect of that is equally as important for many people, not necessarily all, but for many people. And whatever, again, what does that mean to you? All right, so again, here's something that we could provide structure for your embarking on a self-care plan. Maybe don't need it, but here's something. This would work actually pretty well for me, because I like structure and I like being able to kind of plan and see how things are visually going to play out. But it wouldn't work for everybody, and I would not presume to think it will be. All right, so final kind of self-care thoughts to get you to where you could all say that you are compassionately satisfied. Be resilient, ask for help, take care of yourself. I should put that one number one. Do what works for you, and be a good self-advocate. That's one of the things many of us, particularly those of us in the helping professions, we are really good advocates for the people we take care of, and oftentimes terrible advocates for ourselves. And so, again, because it feels guilty, it feels self-indulgent to do that. Connect, play hooky once in a while, lighten up, make good choices, and have faith. And mostly that's have faith in yourself. Know what your triggers are. We all have them. And know what kind of might set you on a downward trajectory that you don't want to go. Know what your warning signs are. and pay attention to those. For a lot of people, it's sleep. And, you know, I'm sure you've all seen and read and are very familiar with the literature that says most Americans are not, adults are not getting an adequate amount of sleep. And we've come to realize, and the research bears this out, not getting adequate sleep has a cascading effect. It can be tied to cognitive function, can be tied to mood disorders, depression, particularly anxiety. Not getting good sleep is really one, I'm speaking for myself here, probably need to figure out a better way to handle that. And then know that doing all of this is hard. And that's okay, because the investment that you make in yourself is a big payoff. All right, so I think we are, oh, I am right on time for ending. There's my info. Please feel free. And, you know, I'm certainly happy to take questions, because I know we're going to have some additional information. I see the next slide there, so I'll remember to put it up. There's an evaluation. And I think that if you have suggestions of things for me to add to my list, please send me an email. And I'll be happy to, because interestingly, and probably not terribly surprisingly, I've been asked to give a variation on this talk several times recently. So thoughts, questions? Yes.
I have a question. So if you were going to give people, healthcare workers, a self-assessment, which one would you give them?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's go back. Okay, so I have 3 here. I think part of it depends on if you're visual. So maybe give people a choice, because you're not doing a research project. They don't all have to do the same one. I'm very visual, so this one would work for me, because I could write in those, you know, in the pie wedges. I could write in things that would work for me. There are people who love filling out questionnaires, and so maybe I hadn't really ever gotten this question before. You're making me think on my feet here. I probably would give people some choices. Maybe offer, you know, have several available. This one, the one that I have, that one would be a really quick way, but I think healthcare professionals might, they would, because it was created specifically for family caregivers. I think, you know, they say, well, of course I'm taking care of my daily activities. I eat, I shower, I do my laundry, you know, so I must not be stressed. I must be doing fine. So that one maybe wouldn't work as well. What did you think of the ones that I mentioned?
I like the picture one too, right?
And if none of these work for you, Google it, because believe you me, thousands will pop up. I did do that, actually. That's a great question. Thank you, Fran.
You know, Dr. Owens. Oh, I was just going to mention, so like when I first started using the Rapid Caregiver Wellbeing Scale, it was only with professionals. And so one of the social workers at one of the hospitals I worked with, they did it, they just did it as part of their staff meeting. They just had them fill them out. And so when she collected them, they didn't really talk about them. She just had them fill them out, you know, and had them leave them. And she said, so when I started going through them, she said, I was shocked at some of the results.
Really?
She said, I would never have guessed that I would have gotten so many that were in that area of, you know, not doing things for themselves. She said, I would not have. She was really surprised. So just kind of tossing that out there from.
No,
you know,
that's a great
workers.
testimonial.
They just, it was part of a staff meeting, and maybe it was because it got to be, you know, and it was the 2 flag. So they got to.
16 question one.
No, it was the 2 flag.
Oh,
like the 2
the
flag
self-copying.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
self-copying, sorry. And so they, you know, took one and they kept one for themselves. And so anyway, just something to think about.
No, that's great, because I've used it a lot more with family caregivers than professionals. But you know, my Sue and I both thought it had a lot of applicability. We just never did that study to see how it worked with them.
I was noticing as you went through one of the things, points on there was being realistic.
Yes.
I'm very, because of my personality, I guess, I'm very routine oriented, have a workout routine, all of that. But I need to remind myself when I go to the gym to get on the elliptical, I'm not training for the Olympics. I don't have to kill myself.
Yes.
The fact that I'm there at all is huge.
Yes. Yes. And you know, use that as a motivator to keep doing it. You're showing up. I did yoga at a studio before COVID, and that all shut down. So I started doing online. The St. Louis County Library offered a 4-week cardio class, and I walk every day. I do this hiking thing. I do some online classes. I thought I was going to die, and I thought, okay, you don't have to do everything that this incredibly fit person on the screen is doing. So I hung in, and I showed up the second week online, and it was a little better. And then the third week, it was a little better. I was doing more of things. And by the fourth week, when I finally was pretty close, never quite there, class was over. But like you, I had to remind myself, you know, look how old you are. And first of all,
That's good there.
a couple of the things she was doing, I had to go there. But I think that, you know, I had to say, I'm here, I'm doing this. I stopped work. It was like a 5 o'clock class. I stopped work and I'm now doing this, and give it your best. I'm not training, you know, for an Iron Woman kind of competition, but I did think that first week. I thought I was going to have some sort of cardiac event. So, but thank you. That's a good point, you know. And if you were training for a marathon, then that would be okay too. You would just have different expectations of yourself. Yeah, that's a wise comment. Yeah.
Along those lines, I think it makes good intuition. A friend of mine says all the time, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. All right?
That is not where I thought that comment was going.
Right. Well, that means it's like the consistency in our schedule. If we're not feeling like exercise, showing up in like the best you can. Really, we only do the best that we can. Otherwise, we would do better. And really, it's about continuing on, being consistent in those behaviors.
Right.
And we can't really be 100% of the time.
Right.
And I talk with professionals often that they really get upset and down on themselves because they can't perform at that top level all the time. So, yeah, I wanted to emphasize.
No, I appreciate that. I think, you know, those are the kind of things we need to tell ourselves, but it's also, think back to my comment about find out who your support system is. You need people who will support you in what you can and want to do. And so you probably wouldn't want to team up with the marathon, you know, preparation person, because that would not make me feel good about myself if I wasn't at that level. Thought I needed to do.
So
I know there is let me get the next slide.
Dr. Berg, Weger, I think.
Oh.
It's right here.
Oh,
I've written down what has to come together for me to have a self-care plan.
excellent.
I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a health professional. I'm a pastor. And I have 2 small children. And I have a husband that leaves for 2 to 6 weeks at a time.
Wow.
I cannot tell you the number of people who tell me, well, just take a bubble bath.
Oh, I know.
So not helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, no.
First of all, when your house doesn't even have a bathtub that's all 6 feet deep. So second of all, what do you have resource-wise for anything like coming together with a plan for self-care? Because so often I just go, I can deal with that when Jim gets home. Well,
So
that's 3
you're
6 weeks from now.
delaying a self-care plan.
Yeah, so I need a hands-on resource that I can go to today that helps me to lay out the steps. What am I looking for? Where am I going? What am I doing next? What do you have?
That's a great question. So I think, the plan that I would put together, actually, you know what? Let me go back. Something like that. Maybe. You can create your own, and you could take that and you could adapt it to you. I mean, you probably don't need skill building, for instance.
That's why I'm here, skill building.
Okay, so you do need skill building. So you would put that, but I think, think about, what would you have in that left-hand column? And they don't have to be these items. These are random to some extent. And I would actually suggest going one step further and putting them in priority order. What is the most important thing to you? Is it your physical health? Is it scheduling? Is it, getting a bathtub? You could take a bubble bath in if you wanted to. That would not be a priority.
Conversation about remodeling that bathroom. I'll give you my husband's phone number.
So I think you make the list that is meaningful for you, but the rest of it, I think, could be applicable. How are you going to do it? When would you do this? And this last column, the most important one. What is your accountability? Who are you accountable to someone? If, some people need to be, and that's why they do, group activities. That's why they sign up for gym memberships. That's, because there is an element of accountability. If you have to pay and you think, oh, I'm not going to keep paying this and not go. So I think that this would look probably very different for you. So I would start with something like the other one. You could use some variation on that. Again, what would be in the outer circle for you is what would depict your life. So think about it as a place to start. Think about, okay, what is the one thing I am not able to do now that I miss, or that I've never done, but thought I would like to do. So, I think that's where you start, and then you kind of go out from there. And for me, it's a scheduling thing. If it's not scheduled, so my friend who's a yoga instructor said, because I said when I couldn't go to my studio place anymore, I said, oh, what am I going to do? And she gave me the name. There's a woman that has all these wonderful YouTube videos. I think I did one because they weren't scheduled. And so that's when I discovered the county library and the AARP classes, because I have to stop what I'm doing and go sit or stand in front of the computer and do it. And it has to be live. I want a real person there. That works for me. Where other people have no trouble doing the recorded ones. That just doesn't work. The cardio class, by the way, got recorded. I've never once done it since then, because that doesn't work for me. I have to have that structure. It has to be scheduled. And I know that about myself. Does that help me?
It does. That
Okay.
helps a lot.
All right, good. Yeah.
So someone that does have compassion fatigue, how long is the recovery period for them to get to the satisfaction?
That would be a great study. I don't think I've ever seen that study. I think it depends on what's the intervention. If you kind of distill it down and try to figure out why are you experiencing stress, secondary trauma, fatigue, whatever we want to call it, I think that the question is, what do you come up with to counter it? And if it's the job, for instance, and you aren't in a position to leave the job or to get a different job within the same organization, then you have to look to other things. So if you can't sort of disempower the stressors, then you have to work around them. So because I've never seen any literature that suggests this, I would think that, you know, it may take longer if you're not able to identify things that really start to address that. So going back to my earlier list of the things that you can do to make sure you get compassion fatigue, you know, look at a list like that and say, okay, what is within my power to do something about? And what actions, and that's really the key, is what actions can I take? Just talked to a friend recently who left her job and feels so much better because she had come to realize that it was challenging and sort of just, yeah, that wouldn't work for everyone, and not everybody could do that. And I think that you have to figure out what works for you. So there's no easy answer. The other thing is how passionate do you get about the self-care plan? Because you know, and sometimes that takes some experimentation to figure out, you know, the thing I thought would make me feel better hasn't. So let me try something else. That's where that whole be open kind of comment comes from. So sorry, I didn't have a good answer for that. It's a good question. We are at time, I know. So, and here's, let me get back to this one. There's an evaluation. There we go.
Yeah, there's an evaluation. There's other things like before that, so.
Okay. Well, thank you all. This has been great fun. For my first out of town presentation, 2.5 years.
Our like a caregiver, you want to ask it?
So, I'll just pass them out. You can either fill them out, kind of just evaluate.
Well,
You
is
can
this
take
your-
it with you, just a kind of a reference on the caregiver well-being scale. If there's anyone clinical here or that, you know, anyone that thinks they would like to have more of these to take with them, please, we can leave some with you. I don't know if Susan has any in her office.
Probably have some.
But we would be happy, I can send them to you from LCSW as well.
No, I wouldn't be able to pull it back up because I've been out right now.
Okay, and the next one, and briefly, just wanted to show you some of the things that we have been doing here at Midmo. Next up is Stephanie Godwin, and she's a Phelps Health Care Manager here at Phelps Health, and she's going to show you the support packet, and we have those for you to take home if you'd like, and also then the new Caregiver Resources webpage that just went live, I think, this week. So